Welcome to the Church Planters Experience.
You are currently living in Wyoming, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been out there?
8 months. I started something called Harkin House
That was in Pennsylvania.
in Pennsylvania, in Chambersburg, about 6, 7 years ago, and it was a halfway house.
What's a halfway house?
Halfway between prison and the community, or three-quarter house is the official term, because a halfway house provides meals. A three-quarter house, you take care of your own needs.
So the people that lived in the halfway house took care of their own stuff.
Yeah, nobody cooked for them, but they took care of their own cooking and cleaning and things like that.
So that was 6 years ago.
Yep.
You started a halfway house.
And we went through, I think there was about 45 men that went through, and each of them came out scarred and marred, emotionally traumatized, because they were sex offenders, and sex offenders in prison are usually chased into the corner. And so I had to be father, mentor, friend, foreman, all in one place. And some of the men were really, really scarred, and it was hard to motivate them and keep them from basically creating chaos in their life again. Most men come out of prison and they want to find a woman, they want a phone, they want to get drunk, and they want a car. And the longer you can keep them from those four entities, the better the chances that they'll stay out long term. Because if they start going back to the places they came from, doing the things that they used to do, pretty soon they'll go back to where they came from.
So the first thing you're going to do for them is get them a job, or?
Well, we were doing that for a while, and then we created our own job training program where I bought and sold things, and I provided warehouse work for them.
Okay.
Now, you're starting to understand that I was creating this system, which was more work for one person than anybody could handle.
Yeah.
Now you understand burnout.
But you're buying and selling stuff, like what?
I was buying and selling truckloads of dent and bent materials, whatever I could find. And I would buy them for nickels and I'd sell them for quarters. And in that, I provided work and I provided funding for the halfway house.
So were you selling that like wholesale or retail?
Yeah, wholesale.
So you're buying it wholesale, selling it wholesale.
I was buying it dirt cheap and then selling it wholesale and making a profit.
Wow.
We did about $1.25 million in a year.
Wow. So you were moving a lot of volume.
Yeah.
And was this stuff like that where you would buy like pallets from rejects
truckloads
of just like a cleaning out in a grocery store, and everybody just dumped all their stuff in a box, a bin, and
I got anything from industrial tools, industrial equipment, to Nike shoes, to sweatshirts, to clothes, to appliances that were bent and dent badly.
Okay. And then you took all this stuff and resold it and that helped support the halfway house.
Yep. And so at the peak, we had like 7 guys working in the warehouse. A couple of them were trucking, a couple of them were in the warehouse. I stayed in the office, and I just stayed close to where I could find things. And it was working out, but it was just too much.
So what did you do before that? Like, I mean, if you started that 6 years ago, what did you do prior to that? Like, what was your
What kind of
occupation?
employment?
Yeah.
I came out of prison, and I had about $180,000, $198,000 worth of debt. I've not always been a Christian, and I wasn't always an honorable person. And so prior to going to prison, I ripped off a lot of people. And then when I came out of prison, I knew that I had to fix the problems I started that got me into prison. And these are the behaviors that I was teaching the men in the halfway house.
Yeah.
And I did construction work, whatever I could do. and I enjoyed it, and I was good at it, but I could never focus. And I don't think God wanted me doing it. I kept hearing him say to me, I want you to go to Nineveh. And I'm going, I don't like the Ninevites. And so what was happening is I was doing this work, but I was unsatisfied. And then when I was satisfied, I wasn't making any money. And just the mix of everything, I heard God clearly saying, lay it all down. I have this premise. I want you to take these Ninevites and I want you to work with them. And so I created a halfway house, and I went to the people in my church and I said, can we do this? And he said, yes, we'll pray about it. We'll get back to you. Don't push me. I'm a pusher. And what I mean is I know I want to do something and I want to get it done quickly. Mm-hmm. I don't want to wait around for 8 years. And after about 6 or 7 months, I went to him and I said, I'm sorry, you're driving me crazy and I'm driving you crazy. May I try to do this thing organically? And he chuckled and said, go ahead. Well, I made 10 phone calls and had funding for a year. I'm telling you, when I think God was telling me to go deal with the Ninevites, he was getting everything lined up. So when I got permission, because accountability was really important in my life, and it still is. But at that point, I was focused in on accountability and I was trying to let the system work. As soon as I was, got permission to go ahead and do it the way organically means without a big organization,
right, yeah.
It just fell into place.
So you ran that single-handedly the whole time then?
Yeah, basically. I had a board of directors, but nobody in the house with me.
So what was the board of directors' function? Like, what did they do?
They were trying to figure out what they were supposed to do. That's the best way.
Typical board of directors, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Normally,
But see, if you have a board of directors and you ask a Mennonite board of directors to raise funds, how often do Mennonites ask other Mennonites for money? They'd rather work for it. So it was a problem because they didn't know how to ask for money. It was outside their skill set. And so I just produced something, or we produced something at that point that was outside their box. I took farmers and turned them into board of directors. And it was interesting because we learned a lot. But I was so impatient that I think I created a lot of problems.
So how do you feel about, you talk about you being impatient, but how do you feel how would Harkin House ever got off the ground if you'd been patient?
I don't think. See, there are 4 types of fuel, okay? And this is just one of my things. There's straw, there's sticks, there's firewood, and there's coal. Coal is the conservative church. Once it ignites, it stays lit.
But very difficult to light.
By itself. So the straw, okay, that's the wind-driven. They're the ones that run from to and fro to the next big thing. And then the free radicals are the other 2 pieces of wood. Free radicals are the people who are coming out of a conservative church or walking near one. They're just not associated to a conservative church, but they're not wind-driven and they're a little more solid. But the reality is we need all 4 of the fuels to get the coal going. Once the coal's ignited, it stays lit. Now that the conservative church has bought into the premise of Harkin House, they're doing great. It's like the soup kitchen I started. Nobody wanted to deal with it. And they told me, they gave me a lot of information during the period. But now the conservative churches have taken it over. And I had to be the person, that sounds bad. I was the person that was willing to just do it without asking and keep it going until it needed or until they seen the value in it.
So that's a question that I have, like with church planting, actually. Yeah. And that happens a lot. Mm-hmm. Is nobody wants to do it. Like everybody thinks it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Like you talk to 100 people and 75 of them say this is a great idea.
but they don't have the effort.
But if you put those 75 people on a board, it would never happen. Or it might happen very slowly.
It wouldn't organically pull together.
But then when you go do something like that, let's go start a Harkin house.
Not a lot of people can do that because it's hard. See, I used to restore buildings, masonry buildings, and I had to have the ability to see what the job was going to be before I started, finished.
Wait,
and I don't know.
You're saying you had to have an end vision?
Yeah, I had to look at this and know what it was going to be before I started, because it takes a month to repoint a house.
Yeah.
How are you going to stay involved in pointing a house every day, mundane, hot work, sweaty, dirty, without knowing that eventually it's going to be like this?
So did you do that a good part of your life?
Off and on, yes. And see, God gave me the ability to see a project completed before I even started it. And so I looked at men who were scarred, dent and bent, and I could see them fixed, even before they believed they could be. And the enthusiasm that I had for them, a few of them just really locked into it. And it propelled them to do more because they felt the comfort. I really like people. And I think you know that. And that's why your kids were all asking me a million questions, because I engage with them. But if you love people, they'll love you back. Now, every once in a while, you get a hard head, but that's okay. And you love them anyhow. Because there were people in the churches that loved me, even though I was a knucklehead. And I was trying to show the people, and see, the room, when I started that, which was a soup kitchen, I'm starting to sound like I started a whole bunch. The room was a soup kitchen I started. Because when I came out of prison, I needed community. I was by myself. Nobody wanted to be around me. So I got homeless people to come into a room, and I fed them because I built my own community. And at one point, I realized I needed something different, and I found the Mennonite church, and then they kind of replaced the people in the room. But I kept this going on.
So you started the room before you met the Mennonite group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I needed family and friends. I'm alone. I lost everything. My wife left me. My life's a wreck, but I needed community. So I looked for it. And then when I met the Mennonite church again, Chambersburg Christian Fellowship, I felt that community once again. I needed that, and that encouragement kept me going.
So why community? You're not a millennial.
No.
You're a little bit past that stage.
I'm way away. I'll be 65 this year.
And that's normally who you're hearing. That's the group that you're hearing a lot of community coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, community talk. But you're a little past that, and you're talking about community.
And see, I grew up in a way where I didn't have family. I was disconnected from my family. I was put in a juvenile prison when I was 6.5. I spent until I was 16 in homes for kids, and then I hit the street when I was 16. So I really never had a community. And the only thing that I had were the people that were right in front of me, and that situation changed every so often. So when I came out of prison and I lost everything, I wanted to reacquire some of that, and I wanted some friendship and family, but I didn't know how to behave in it. So I pushed everybody away, and it's what I did to my family essentially before I went to prison. I just would treat everybody terribly, and they ran away from me. But I wanted to stop that. And I found in that church community. And we were in purpose for a long period of time. And then when I'm not going to make it sound, there was a group of people that started to apply their expectations on the people coming into the room and the people we were working with. And when their expectation wasn't met, they got disenfranchised and they wanted to do something else because they had to see something come out of their efforts. And I realized that Christ propels us to give and give and give and don't expect a result.
So are you talking about pragmatism?
Pragmatism?
Like pragmatism is when you believe that if something works, it's good. If it's not working, like if it's not working, do something else.
Well,
And so they're wanting to see something working.
they needed results from their efforts.
Right.
And if you're not getting the results, then you stop the effort. I never turned that off. I never really expected very much more than just having people to come, people to talk to, and people to feed. Because again, I love people and I love talking to them.
So you're running Harkin House single-handedly.
Well, I had
Almost.
board. They were there, but they did the back end stuff. I was in the front end.
But you had volunteers come in?
I would. Well, see, the thing is, when I proposed this idea of Harkin House, I knew they need a community too. They're sex offenders. Nobody really liked the idea. So how do you get people to look at sex offenders like human beings? You put them in front of people, and you bring the people in to mentor them in daily devotions. And then at some point, you say, hey, would you like to do a community meal? Yeah, come on in and serve the men on Wednesday night. So what I was doing was bringing people to face each other. And when they looked at each other, they realized they're not really that bad. I mean, they did some bad things, but they could overlook it. And they started to have empathy for the men. And when the empathy began, they fell in love with it. And sometimes you just got to get over that hump of disapproval for what they did and the realization that they are hurt and they need help.
So does Harkin House still run?
Yeah. Earl Eby took it over. The guy who witnessed to me when I was a young knucklehead was named David Eby. It's his son, Earl Eby, who's taken over Harkin House.
Okay.
So the guy who witnessed to me that changed my life 28 years later, because this wasn't, hey, you need Jesus, and I walked in. He witnessed to me, and 28 years later, when I was in a mess and I was in prison for my behaviors, I started to think, I'm doing something wrong. And then I started thinking about everything that I did wrong. And I got to the place where I realized there was an answer back there. It was a guy asking me, where would I spend eternity? And I told him, why do you care if I don't? But I did. It was so hidden through so many behaviors and so many liabilities and lies and just whatever was going on in my heart at that time. I had to slow the noise down enough to clearly hear that I needed help.
So how did you get in contact with this EB man?
I moved from Philadelphia to St. Thomas, and my second grade school teacher bought an apple and peach orchard, and he asked me if I wanted to manage it. And I said, dude, I don't know anything about fruit. But a couple weeks later, my house got broken into in Philadelphia, and I realized that my family, it was dangerous. Crack cocaine hit the neighborhood. In the neighborhood that had made a whole bunch of gains were lost. And I realized it was time to get out of there. So I called my school teacher, Tom Small, and asked him if that place was still available, and he said yes. So I closed the business, had a house put up for sale, and moved.
No, wait. So what kind of business did you have in Philadelphia?
Masonry restoration.
Okay, so you were doing masonry restoration.
Yeah. I know I bounce around a lot. I'm sorry.
No, that's...
But I put my business up and my house up, and I moved to the middle of nowhere in 2 weeks. And I remember when I moved a whole bunch of stuff. I moved into this tiny house in the middle of 100 acres, and I didn't even know the phone worked. And it rang, and I picked it up, and I go, hello, and they go, who's this? And I go, I don't know, who's this? Click. Now, I grew up with horror movies. There's no curtains in the windows. I'm starting to look around like, what is out here? I have never been in the country. I had to take towels and put in the washer machine so it would make noise, boom, 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 so I could go to sleep.
That's a real primitive sound machine.
It was no. I put like a lump so it was off balance and it was beaten, and that was the only way I could go to sleep. I was terrified. I had no bed, and I found out later on it was a woman named Jenny Reinhardt, and she was looking over the place, but nobody told me the phone worked, so I didn't know what to think. And it was interesting. So I moved all my stuff to St. Thomas, and me and my wife moved there with my son, and I proceeded to just be miserable because I didn't know what I wanted. I knew I didn't want my family in a place of Philadelphia, but I never lived in a quiet country setting, so I was uncomfortable. Now, when I moved there, when I lived in Philadelphia, we were on Shelton Avenue, and there was a riot in front of my house, and I slept through it, okay? Now, I moved to St. Thomas, and after about 9 months, there's a fire engine that rode by a half mile later, and I stood up looking out the window like, what was that noise? It was just a different perspective. But what was going on is my mind in the adrenaline and the noise in my life, noise being pornography, noise being criminal intent, noise being loud music, driving fast. I kept the adrenaline up in my life so I didn't have to think. And here I am in the middle of a field and I don't have that adrenaline. And so it just drove me nuts. So I started going back to Philadelphia and I supplemented the craziness to make myself feel normal. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but like I couldn't go from 90 miles an hour to 2 miles an hour and be comfortable. And so I went through all that stuff and I still wasn't happy because there was something wrong with me. I had a soul sickness that I didn't understand and I didn't know what to do with. Like I was looking for answers and I was finding them, but they weren't satisfying the problem. One time I took my wife to a River Brethren church in Edenville. And I think I was about 23. And I told her, we came back because I met 3 men, Henry Blank, Myron Wingard, and Danny Byers. And I called them, well, I won't use that term on the video, but I had a nickname because they were the disenfranchised people. And they would sit in the back. Now, don't take that wrong. I'm just telling you this is how I perceived it. And I felt comfortable because they were sitting where I was comfortable sitting. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they came to me just to make me feel comfortable. And I liked them guys. So I went to my wife and I said, I'd like to join that church. And she said, well, if you want to do that, do it by yourself. And that was the end of that. So I was looking for an answer and God was knocking, but I wasn't ready. I left that place. And I went through 28 years more sin. And it wasn't until I fell completely down and I was in a place where all the noise quieted down, prison, before I reached out and realized I needed some help. And go ahead.
So you were in this orchard when Mr. Eby talked to you, is that right? Mm-hmm. Is this before or after you went to the River Brethren Church?
It was around the same time.
Okay.
Because I didn't know what a Mennonite was. I have this frail old guy, it's Truman Eby's uncle. He's got this shirt buckled and very stout looking, has a hat looking. And I didn't know what to think about him, but there was something about him, there was a simpleness. And I don't mean simple in the mind, just a simplistic belief system that appealed to me. We had this conversation one time and he said, well, we were talking about college. He said, what are you going to college for? And I said, engineering. He said, what do they teach you? And I said, the first 2 years they teach you how to get water from the top of the hill to the bottom. He looked at me and he said, well, what do they teach you the next 2 years? I said, get water from the bottom to the top. He said, come here, let me show you. And he dipped his hand into the pond and he just threw it up in the air. And I said, I just really enjoyed that simplistic thought process. not over-engineered. And I think he gave me the desire for a simple belief system, not a complex theory.
So was he Eastern? Or Washington County?
Washington, Franklin, Easton. I don't know which one. I think he was more Eastern. And we became friends. And he taught me something 28 years before I utilized the tools that he gave me. I was 22. I'm 40 some years old at this point. I'm in prison. 22 when I met him, 40 something when I'm in prison. And I remembered that conversation. And I remembered what he was offering me. And at that point, with everything stripped away, all the adrenaline gone, all the behaviors, all the labels, all the stuff that kept me going was gone. I realized that I hurt everyone. And I was at the center of the problem. And at that point, I fell off my bunk and hit the floor. I can't, you can, help. And that's when my life began to change. I was a wheelchair pusher in prison, and I hated the men I was working with. I wanted to beat them with the wheelchair. They gave me a job. And I was to push people, and I would listen to them talk to me, and I was like, oh, will you shut up? But the longer I listened to them, the more I developed empathy. You know, there's a parody there. Take the Mennonites and put them in front of prisoners, and the longer they talk to each other, they develop empathy. So God taught me how to stage something. Anyway, I was pushing men, and I became good at what I was doing. I wasn't getting paid very much, like 27 cents an hour. But I took the job to heart. And I realized the men that I was pushing are all traumatized, and they were all hurt. Now, they've done their thing. I'm not saying they're victims. But inside their behaviors, there's reasons why they did certain things. The reason they were hurting people. They were hurt. They were traumatized. I looked past that, and I could start to see them a better person, a better version of themselves, even before they were trying. And so I treated them with respect. And I remember the guards would call me and say, Matthews, take inmate over to medical. And at one point I looked at him and I said, excuse me, that man is my client. He's no longer an inmate. And when you address him, I would appreciate if you addressed him as your client. And they laughed at me.
I suppose I didn't go down too well in prison.
Well, they laughed at me, and they, by that time, they were like, what do we do with this guy? And finally, one day, Nice, I think was his name, he said, Matthew, take your client over to medical. And like from that point, it seemed like a few of the guards started, to soften in their stance. I know, when you're a prison guard, you have to keep your wall up. But I was in some way able to break down that wall and give them a chance to look at somebody a little bit differently. And, it was all around the time that I fell off my bunk. I was in prison for 2.5 years. And every day I looked at the pipe above my bed and I wanted to hang myself because I destroyed everything that I had. And then the second part of my sentence is when I fell. And instead of wanting to destroy myself, I wanted to better myself. And so I seen the guards all change the way they perceived me. Like I wasn't walking around with my fist clenched anymore. I wasn't looking for a fight. I started to walk a little bit differently. Now, you met me after prison, and I know I was rough, but you should have seen me when I was really rough, and they seen a difference in me. And then, there was one time I went to one of the lieutenants and I said, can I go down there and pick up cigarette butts? I was always looking for something to do. I couldn't stand just sitting. It was a waste of time. So I found jobs that I could do and they would leave me alone. And so I'm walking down after I got permission. Lieutenant Elder got on the radio. He called on the phone And he said that he's going down there to pick up cigarette butts. He was telling control because they're watching me on cameras. Halfway down, I met Sergeant Beon. And he looked at me and he's like, who do you know? And I said, what are you talking about? They just told me if you want to touch the fence, you're allowed to. And I was like, I ain't got a clue what you're talking about. You're not allowed to touch the fence. And for some reason, either he was telling me I had permission or Lieutenant Elder told him. I don't know what it was. But Lieutenant Elder seen a difference in the way I walked, the way I talked. And the only defining factor from 2.5 years prior was a beginning, a rudimentary desire to follow Jesus Christ. And being in the chapel, not just to be there and hide out, but to be a participant. And the pastoral staff would have me help with baptisms and all kinds of other things. And my life started to change. It was kind of nice, you know. I miss, now don't take me wrong when I say this, I miss the closeness in the relationships I had in prison because we had to be there with each other. Mm-hmm. So either you're going to tear each other apart or you're going to just deal with each other. And I had friends in there that I could talk to. And when I came out of prison, I didn't have them same connections. I had to rebuild them.
Yeah.
And so when my life gets a little tough here and there, during during Harkin House, one of the gentlemen who was there killed himself. I started to miss the friendships I had back here because of the emotional stress. I didn't know how to deal with emotional stress. And I'm only now starting, I'm 64 and I'm learning how to be a grown-up. It's terrible.
So where did you start your photography? Like, have you done that all your life or has that just been?
Off and on I've had a camera. Mm-hmm. And I've had an artistic eye. But when I came out of prison, I went to work for a guy named Kevin Breckbell. And I was a salesman, but there wasn't a lot of work. And somehow I got a camera to take pictures of the trailers. Well, I started taking pictures of tree logs or something else. And I was more interested in doing that than sales. So I think it was in 2017, yeah, it was, that I really just started focusing on it. And I have a natural ability to, there's something called a sweet spot where you can stage a picture just a way where mm-hmm. it's, well, I naturally do that and I don't even realize I'm doing it.
So did you, have you been able to monetize that at all?
Nope, I haven't tried.
You haven't tried, it's just, that'd take all the fun out of it.
I do it for pleasure. And the thing is, when my life gets really stressed, instead of creating havoc, what I do is I create my camera and I run. And I just go on, you know, like I was telling your son today, I'll take 1,000 pictures tomorrow. I just get into just taking pictures and then I process them later on. And that seems to be the opiate in my life anymore. It's a healthy outlet.
Yeah.
And I love to take pictures of people because I can see them better than they are.
So what did you learn about like photography equipment and like all that kind of like?
I just bounced into it and started to talk to people. I've met a couple professional photographers and I will ask them questions. And after a while, we started looking at each other's work and they're like, you're better than me. And I'm like, I don't think I have very much. Now I know that I'm okay at it. I may not be a good photographer, but I'm an extremely good editor. And so I can make a crappy picture look good. And I just figured it out.
So what kind of equipment are you running?
This one's an R6. It's a Canon R6 mirrorless. This is an 85 millimeter lens that I bought from Regan Schrock from Anabaptist Perspective.
Okay.
I have about, I think, 50 lenses. Anything from a 400 millimeter prime to a 300 millimeter prime to, I just have a lot of lenses because I've invested heavily into them.
Yeah, it's fun looking at your WhatsApp status. I see I'm always seeing, some people photo dump on WhatsApp, and it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But like with Patrick, it's always like, didn't expect that. Didn't see that one coming. Like,
Well, see, the photography, if you look at my UPic page, it says, my life has changed and my eyes are different. So come take a walk with me as I walk through Christianity, and I'll show you the things in a new way. And that's basically what photography has been able to do. And whereas I would have used it prior to Christ for skin or for pleasure, now I'm looking at it for simplicity. That same simplicity that I see in Mr. Eby. Just a very, very simple thing. Like I'll look at a weed and go, oh, that's cool. And it's just how you stage that weed and you edit that weed. It really draws out the beauty. One of my first shots when I got my own camera, which was a T3, Canon T3, I was walking downtown Chambersburg, and I was in the back of the event. There was like thousands of people. And there was a pile of trash. And in the middle, there was a flower. So I could focus in on the trash, or I can eliminate the trash and focus on the flower. And that's what I did. And that's how my approach. I look for good in everything. So even a broken window can be beautiful if you just learn how to look at it.
So is your photography a little bit like your approach to humanity then? You're always looking for
the good in people. Mm-hmm. Because I wanted people to see the good in me. And when I didn't see the good in me, I didn't know what to do. And so I had to gain faith that I could see it in other people before I could see it in me. You know, what do you say to somebody who was married twice and destroyed both marriages? Because they weren't satisfied. They were always looking for something more. It's not good. So I needed to be restored to something. I try to use my Father's eyes on other people. And by looking at other people the way my Father looks at me, I gain some respect for me here.
Yeah, so now you've left Harkin House and moved on to Wyoming.
Yes.
And so Harkin House just was taking over your life.
I describe it this way, and I'm only telling you 50% of the story. And if you email Hector, I'll give you the phone numbers and email addresses. You can ask them the other side of the story.
Okay.
But working with a board of directors was like pushing a boulder up the hill. Now, see, I'm not a box person. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And the Mennonites that I was working with, they were box people. And when you have a non-box person working with box people, it creates conflict. So I'm pushing this boulder up the hill, and every once in a while, it's a lot of work, and I look around the other side, and it felt like they were pushing the rock back towards me. So when you have that kind of premise with a board, and you have that kind of premise with the men, the love that I had for working with the guys had weaned, and it just became a lot of work. So I needed to retire.
Well, I've heard that there's actually that burnout is usually not because of the work. Like people rarely get burned out because of the work. We usually get burned out because of no longer finding enjoyment or joy in the work.
Lamar Showalter one time gave a sermon, and I keep asking him to recreate it. And he talked about what most people think Christ is like. When you come to Christ, you're sitting on this couch, and it's a calm sea, and everything's so good. When in reality, when you're in Christ, you're on a couch and it's a torrent storm and things are just going all the time, but because you're tethered to the right rock, your foundation, you stay centered. During that halfway house experience, I pulled the tether from Christ and I put it back into me. And my ego got a little wild. And so when you're not talking to your Father for strength, you lose strength. And so I got a little self-centered and I had to get out of there because I burned out. I believe that if I stayed tethered to Christ, I would have been able to produce better, but I didn't. So I needed to leave to find myself again. That kind of sounds like 60s terminology.
Well, there is that. There is also that thing that we're all human. Like you just can't. At some point in time, we all make mistakes, and God can use those mistakes for the good.
I'm learning a lot in Wyoming because the noise went down again. See, I artificially recreated the noise and the activity in my life. And so prior to Christ, that noise and activity kept Christ out. So when I became a Christian, I was in prison because I could hear his small, quiet voice. So I come out of prison and it's quiet, but I recreated the noise and I couldn't hear him anymore. So I went to Wyoming and I heard again.
Well, I mean that is definitely wow, because just like the noise in our lives is so gets pretty loud sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I need I'm a fireman. I mean, I don't
you put out fires.
Not literally.
You put out fires.
Not literally, but that's I enjoy putting out fires more than trying to prevent fires. And so that creates that problem where lots of activity feels good to me. Mm-hmm. in a way.
I offer to give you board of directors numbers, and if you want, ask Hector. I'll give you numbers of guys in the halfway house. And the real effect that I had were those people. And if you ask them how they felt being there, they'll tell you, this is from what they've told me. I made them feel home and feel safe, and they had family. The same things that I was missing when I came out of prison, I try to recreate for them.
Yeah. So what are you going to do in Wyoming? Like,
I'm getting ready to move. Well,
you're getting ready to move to Idaho?
No. What happened is I'm in Wyoming, Cheyenne, and I was looking at RVs. My living situation was a little torrent, and I was freaking out, like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to stay? I'm not making enough money to buy a house. I don't want to do that, and I'm just going through a lot of stuff. And I started to hear God again. So I started to say to him, look, I need, what do I do here? Well, I ran up to a Walmart. I started looking at RVs. And I was doing it for a couple weeks. I was in Walmart and there's a RV parked this way properly. I pulled in and I jumped out of my car, left the door open, and I'm walking around looking at it. I didn't know anybody was inside. And this guy popped his head out and he said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I've been looking at these on the internet and I've never seen one up close. I just want to see what it looks like. And he invited me in. And we walked through, and his wife and 2 daughters came. We had a little conversation. We talked a little bit. They left. They were going to Yellowstone. 3.5 weeks later, I get a text from them. We've decided to give you the RV for $1. And I was afraid. I'm like, this is a setup. And I just was telling myself, walk with this thing and go forward. About 3 weeks later, I flew into New Jersey and drove it back. I call that RV my turtle shell because no matter where I'm at, I have my home with me. Well, when I went to Scranton to pick it up, I told the guy I was going to work for, I'll start on Monday, but I have to go pick up this RV. So I flew out on Thursday, picked it up on Thursday night, and started driving back. And I drove 1,600 miles in 3 days. Now, the guy, Matt, and his wife had me over for dinner. We did some praying. We talked a little bit. And I went out with Matt to get the RV, and he was trying to tell me all these different things. And we finished up, and he said, before I left, now you can go make some tents. And like, I'm juiced up, I'm in the RV, checking it, making sure, and I'm taking off up the hill. So that night I got maybe an hour, 2 hours. The next morning, about 300 miles, my mind starts moving. What do you mean by this? You can go make some tents. And I just had this overwhelming feeling that why he gave it to me was to do ministry. And so I created a YouTube channel called The Tent Makers Travels. And I've been planning since that point to take my RV and go from Wyoming back to Kingdom Fellowship Weekend in 26 weeks. Now, I don't have the finances for it. I don't have everything that I need. And I keep hearing God say, trust me, I've got your back.
So what's your, do you have a rough itinerary, or what's 26 weeks? Where are you going?
Well, my first stop is Cadwell, Idaho.
And why Cadwell?
Because it's about 10 hours away from where I'm at now.
Okay.
And so each week, if I
are you going to where you know somebody, or are you just hitting
I don't know.
towns?
I just call them.
Okay. Like, who do you call? Or
Okay. Another thing I started.
what else did you start, Patrick?
I'm involved in something called Strength to Strength and a couple other things.
You did start that.
Shut up. But anyway, we were just sitting. What was happening is people were calling me saying, I'm in California, I need a church near me. And I really understood the need to find somebody quicker than what we were. I went to somebody, I was at Anabaptist Identity Conference, and a gentleman taught me how to put this app on. And I went to look for my church, and I said, how come Chambersburg Christian Fellowship's not in there? He said, well, they're unaffiliated. And I thought, well, what's that have to do with anything? Well, he was an affiliated person. So it just gnawed at me. So I called about 14 people, and I said, this is the problem. Merle Hurd taught me this. I laid the problem out and said, what would you do if this was in front of you? Well, I called the right people, because a number of months later, they started something called churchindex.org. Churchindex.org. Okay. Now, if you want to really have a laugh, call Glenn Martin and ask him what website I got him the first time. I don't spell well. Okay. So I registered the name Crunchindex.org, crunchfinders.org. And, I sent it to him, and he goes, well, I think it called church.
So you were the mastermind behind that one too?
I don't know mastermind. I'm just a servant.
Okay, but that was your idea.
Yeah.
Wow, you're like an Elon Musk of the Mennonites.
Well, no, I look for things that I need and try to figure out how to develop them, because if I need them, you need them too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I've used that a lot already.
Now, see, churchindex.org is what I'm using, and so I'm looking at these churches and emailing and calling people.
Okay.
Okay, so when I put the idea, this is literally how I did it. I said, this is the problem. We have a website that works with affiliated. Is there a way we can create a website that honors affiliated as well as unaffiliated? And the spirit behind it was correct, because these guys pulled it together. Darvin Martin is the webmaster for that. And it took a whole bunch of people. But yeah, it's going now. I needed it first. I needed community, so I started the room. I needed accountability. I started Harkin House. I was lonely during COVID. I started a chat group. So each stage along the way, I need something, and I figure they might too. So come on, let's try it. Now, I'm a little pushy, so it takes a little bit while to get people involved. And right now, I need to see that there's a bigger church out there than what I've been put in front of. And so I'm going to take a ride across the United States, knock on people's doors, and spend a week with them. If they have a ministry, help them with it. If they don't, let's go feed somebody.
So churchindex.org, and you're just emailing, just cold calling
people. Yep.
Emailing people just right off the site.
But again, box people. I'm presenting an out-of-the-box experience for a box person. How well do you think that's going to work?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of fun because really and this is what I have. So here's something I've really been thinking about is all these unaffiliated churches. I wish we could figure out a way. I think unaffiliation is a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. To me, it feels dated. It's time to let's get past that, and we need traveling missionaries, circuit riding preachers, or something to bring together these unaffiliated churches, because there's so many of them are small and lonely and need community, and it's just somebody needs to do it.
Well, I was sitting behind Kingdom Fellowship Weekend about 5 years ago, and I proposed this idea to a few men from City Light Mennonite Church and Westside Fellowship, and we all laughed and thought it was a cool idea to go on this traveling adventure and bring people, and they all laughed. And then we presented it to somebody, and reality shot in there. He goes, "Oh, that never work." So it just got put away.
No, why wouldn't it work? Like,
Because it was too outside the box. But guess what? Five years later, I pull up to an RV and I start looking at it, and the guy goes, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been looking at these on the internet, and I just wanted to see what it looks like." And he called me and he gave it to me so I can go make tents. I think God's given me the ability to just knock on hearts and do something different. You know, I have this theory. Most people are afraid of what people are going to think about them. My reputation's shot. I've been to prison. What are you going to do? Throw me in? I'm already there. But there's a story about this little Chinese girl. Every day she's to go to the river and fill her pots. She puts the stick and she carries the 2 pots of water. And after months, the one pot, which stays full all the time, is complaining that the pot on the other side has a crack and it's losing all of its water. And wow, I'm doing all the work and look at that. And the little Chinese girl looks at the pot that's holding 100% of water and said, "You don't see that side of the path. On that side of the path, we're watering the flowers. We pick the flowers, we put them in our house, and we sell them." And so the theory in life that I have now is be a cracked pot where you are. And if you allow sufficient water to flow through you, life will gather at your feet. And so that's what I want to do. Just go encourage people. Now, I know I'll get my hisses and boos. That's nothing new. But it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because I can see the people fixed before I start. Now, I came here because I was broken, and I brought broken people so you could see them. The room was set up because I heard people, "We want to fish." And they never did any fishing, so I brought the pond to them.
So you stocked the pond with fish.
People. And they said, well, the people aren't good enough. Well, that's, it's only as good as your efforts. So the Harkin House, I brought more fish to them. And now they're fishing that. And they're doing well. The conservative church has taken over the soup kitchen. Earl Evie took over the halfway house. Glenn Martin took over Strength to Strength. Glenn and the guys took over Strength to Strength. Churchindex.org is taken care of by Darvin Martin.
So the Earl Eby, what's his affiliation?
He's Brethren Church.
Brethren.
Yep. And at one point when we were bringing Brethren into a conservative Mennonite organization, there were worries about, is his standards high enough? Well, the people that were worrying about the standards are no longer there. We have all these people who were less than the first choice running it. I grew up with an epoxy floor. I don't see these lines. I don't understand them. My concept of God wasn't really put together until I came to the churches. And so I look at everybody as whole. I see them fixed before they start. What I was trying to get at is when I came here, the intention was to work with broken people, and pretty soon I realized we have a broken church. And somehow I'm trying to fix the broken church.
So what's the I mean, I'm not pushing back against a broken church. I just want to know where are the biggest cracks?
If you do not have activity for your young people, at some point they point their lasers at each other.
No, what do you mean by activity?
They need something to do. And it's not song leading. It's not choir practice. They need to do active. Merle Weaver figured out that if he could radicalize the youth, he could keep them. And he's got a whole generation of young people active, doing service with a purpose, and they're fulfilled. And he's keeping them people in the churches. We need to be involved in ministry, whether you're feeding people, housing people, or teaching people. We need to do something that the young people can be involved in.
So you're saying radicalize them by service, not, I mean, when you're talking about not song leading, does that mean bowling or volleyball?
Yeah, well.
Or are those all in the same?
They're social activities.
Okay.
And song leading, don't take me wrong. Song leading is a very important thing. Don't get me wrong. I'll be biting my tongue forever on this. But you have to give them something to sink their teeth into. And so, what was it? 3 weeks ago, I took about 100 volunteers into Kensington. And we went there to feed heroin addicts. I took Holtwood or Upward Disciples School, 46 of their students, in to feed heroin addicts to give them a compare and contrast. Most of these young people came from kingdom-focused churches. And I told them, we come from the kingdom of God. And today we were in the kingdom of Satan at his best. No one starts their day going, I want to be a fentanyl addict tomorrow. But sin is like a vacuum, it draws you out. And unless you can see the two ends, the two polar ends, you don't know where you want to be. And you have to give them something to do, sink their teeth into, to become passionate about. And I love taking people in and showing them how to be street smart within a bad environment so that they can come out of that. Now, I also told them that we came from the kingdom of God, kingdom of Satan. I said, it will take me 30 years to fully acclimate into a Mennonite church, because it usually takes 3 generations. I'm 64. Does that mean I'm dead before you accept me? That's a little over dramatized. But the reality is it takes me 30 years, but it takes you 15 minutes to leave. Don't throw your culture away. Your parents came here. There's something valuable to this culture. Keep it, preserve it, realize that it's special. If somebody like me wants it, there's probably value there. So look at it and realistically work with. Now, I'm not saying, there's a lot of things that need to be worked on. But the core value of Christian lifestyle that produced a culture of Christians, which is called Mennonite, Anabaptist, Swift Brethren, it's a valuable thing. The extra biblical things, that's something you're going to have to deal with. I don't. There's beauty in that. And I think the Mennonite church or the Christian community that you're proposing is the answer to the world's problems. We don't present it that way because what happens is everybody wants to colonialize you. You have to come in, suit up, and show up.
No, wait a minute. Colonial? You mean like all the
colloquializing?
The Mennonite churches want to make you
not just Mennonite, Amish churches too. They want you to fit in.
It's not just Amish and Mennonite. Actually, it's Mormons too.
I know that, but
yeah,
we're dealing with I'm not saying lose your identity, but if I have to come in and dress a certain way to fit in, then you don't accept me for the way I am. You want me to be comfortable to you, and each church has their practical application of how to perform church. And if I join that church and they say, I need to wear a yellow striped shirt, I can't complain because I joined your church that I'm wearing a yellow striped shirt. That's something I made a decision to do. And if I'm uncomfortable with it, then I don't need to be there.
But that's not the kingdom of God.
No, the kingdom of God is going to have, I told in the soup kitchen one time, I'm in front of a room of about 40 or 50 people, and they're homeless. And I said, when I pass away, say I get to heaven, if I look around and only see Mennonites, I'm going to be bored. I need people like you to come with me. So I beg you to change your life so that I won't be lonely. And it's not just me. I'm just saying we need diversity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But see, that's been the hardest thing to grasp because they have a system that works and they figure the system has to stay the same. And I understand some of that packing of the fences to prevent the loss of your children. I understand that stuff. But you don't get them by rules, you get them by the heart. Okay, I'm proposing things that you've thought about. I know that.
No, I'm trying to yes, I've thought of, obviously.
Yeah, I know.
Who hasn't thought of all this stuff? But what I'm thinking about is you're going to travel around and you're going to hit 26 different churches this summer, hopefully, or this.
Yeah. And I'll end up at Kingdom Fellowship Weekend.
And when do you have to start?
March the 1st, 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But see, I don't have to have the list completed.
Right, yeah. You can change the list halfway through if you need to.
Well, see, I have this overwhelming sense that I'll be okay. And I know, and it's not based on my performance.
But as you travel around to various communities, and you meet young people, which you're definitely onto something. I think Merle Weaver's definitely onto something when you're talking about mobilizing the young people. Because the older I get, the more I think about that. Like, if and that's actually why. And that's part of the reason why I wrote this
Your
book that I did, because my intention was I needed to read that when I was 25, And then you
You
realize,
needed it first.
like, yeah, I wrote it for me, but because that's what I should have seen when I was 25 or younger. I probably wouldn't have been very interested until I was probably in my mid-20s. But I'm looking at people that have changed the world, and we're right around the anniversary of the beginning of the Anabaptists.
We're past it. It was February the 17th.
How old were them?
500 years.
How old were them guys?
Huh?
How old were
They
them
were
guys?
they were in their 20s.
26, and 32, I think.
But listen to John Ruth's second podcast with the Anabaptist.
Who?
John Ruth.
John Ruth.
Yeah, he talks about Conrad Grebel
Okay.
in Anabaptist perspective. Everybody has this idea that he was this perfect person. He was broken. What they did, what changed his life. John says that he had some problems in his life. You'll listen to it and you'll understand.
And that was on Anabaptist perspectives.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was just recently put out. John Ruth's a 90-year-old historian. Okay. And he studied the Swiss Brethren. What he realized, and this came from a letter from Conrad Grebel, when we read the scriptures, that's when the magic happened. Up until that point, he was searching for answers and he couldn't figure out what it was he needed. But when they sat down and read the scriptures, that's when God revealed himself and he was convicted. And he died soon after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't. None of them made it very long.
No.
But yeah, that's kind of. I'm twice as old. I'm not quite, but I'm almost twice as old as those two.
I'm 3 times as old.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go.
Like what they've done and what they did,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at through the Martyr's Mirror, there's just full of young people. And I've seen that in the last 10 years, especially maybe 15 years. I've really seen that we as a Mennonite culture don't offer very much for our young men.
They have anesthetized that portion of evangelism. Meaning I don't mean it in a bad way. It's not been used, so it fell asleep. We need to awaken that. And the way to start something is just to do it.
Well, and that is what has happened. I think that's what happens when you talk about coal. Mm-hmm. Like somehow we've not been able to light the coal coming up. Mm-hmm. The chunks are getting bigger or something, or we've just cleaned out all the straw
clinkers.
Yeah.
Well, see, what's happened is they figured that the older generation is going to take care of it, and the younger generation sits there, and they become dissatisfied, and they disappear. And they go, well, why is the church dying? It's dying because they didn't give them something to do.
Well, the ones that do care, that are on fire, that are excited, they're moving out. Mm-hmm. And a good portion of them have just moved on beyond the Anabaptists. The small fringe of us that have stayed on the fringe of the Anabaptists.
Free radicals.
Is that what you call them?
You know why? What's the chemical in the human body that causes cancer?
Free radicals.
Yes. And so what's the conservative church look at free radicals like?
Cancer.
They're going to cause cancer in the body. And, it's unfortunate, but...
Well, we're not free radicals.
No, you're free and you're able to do what God's calling you to do.
Right, but just going and doing something is really what I like. That, like, that's me. Like, when
I had a board of directors, and it just was a lot of work. And when I got out to Wyoming, I wanted to start feeding people, and so I went and spent whatever I spent. I bought a grill. I pulled up to the local park. I started cooking hamburgers and started talking to people. And they were like, why do you do this? I said, because if I didn't do it, I'd be here with you. I'd be living here. And the reality is I have no board of directors. I don't have to answer to anybody. And I feel free again and radical. So I'm doing what I was supposed to be.
So is there you being a free radical, is there a is there a balance, if you want to say it? I know balance gets us in trouble because what happens is we say, well, there needs to be a balance, and then nobody wants to be a free radical, and nobody wants to do those things that should be done. And I think one of those is, like, from my point of view, one of those things is starting new churches. It's way more accepted in the Anabaptist adjacent, but if you're in the Anabaptist proper box, starting a new church is like, no, you can't do that.
The problem with this is just my view. It doesn't mean it's correct. If you have to have the list completed before you start something, and you have to know the ending before you begin, you'll never begin. You'll be stuck in paralysis because you can never have the list long enough. Sooner or later, you have to just get up and do it. There's this big saying about the committee of fishermen. Guys sat and said, I want to start fishing. So they started a committee, which started the subcommittee, which board of directors, and the whole long page goes into it. And by the end, the guy just went and fished, and the whole group came and said, you're doing it wrong. You have to sometimes just get out and do something. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. You don't need to know the ending. Enjoy it while you can.
So some people would say that attitude is anti-community.
What community?
Like the community doesn't get to speak into it. Like if you're just going to go do something.
I have two elders in this thing called the Tent Makers Travels. Chester Weaver is an elder, and Kent Hall Baker. So I'm looking for that accountability, and I'm looking for that authority into it. I have become a Mennonite.
So,
and I'm not bashing Mennonites. Don't take me wrong. That I have become a Mennonite, and right. I'm okay with it.
Hopefully nobody's going to take us as bashing Mennonites. We're talking. This is interior talk, not exterior.
Yep.
So this podcast is for Mennonites.
I love
by Mennonites.
I love my church. I love these people.
And I have no desire to try to convince anyone otherwise. I'm not trying to convince anybody to be Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant for sure. Wow.
See, I was involved with a church that their big thing was the historical faith. But before I just have this thing, the historical faith is good. I just like the historical practice. And Pentecost showed the historical practice. They fed, they housed, they bandaged, they visited it. And for some reason, that appeals to me because it's the practical application of a Christian lifestyle. It's not a theoretical practice. It's you got to do something. And I'm not saying one is worse than the other. I'm just saying that at some point, you have to decide what you want to do. And I want to bandage people. I was broken. And broken people totally are sold out, that they need help. Theoretical people, or people who are theoretically broken, understand why they need a savior, but they're not practically there. There's something about being totally broken and knowing there's no way out, that you sell out 100% to Jesus Christ. And you just want to pass it on to somebody else. I'm one of them people. I have nothing when I came here, and I'm trying to leave with less by giving everything away. I don't know.
So how are you going to, are you intending to fund your traveling by making tents as you travel?
Well, I had this idea, and I put it out to a few people. I'm $75 a month for 6 months, $450. I got a certain amount of people giving me some money. And since it's under a 501(c)(3), this is not Patrick's going to town, I'm going to the shore. This is me going to do work.
Wait a minute. So Tent Makers is a 501c3?
No, Matthew 25 is.
Matthew 25. Now this is a new one.
No. It's been
Okay, this is one. Let me see. This is 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, see, that's part of my problem because I've been so filled with energy that a lot of people don't know what to do with it. And I was able to hold on. Well, first of all, there's the Bridge to Freedom. There's Harkin House. There's Harkenneth Group NPO Corp. There's a lot of legal work that I did.
Okay.
And the Matthew 25 is just a food project that I've been doing ever since COVID. What happened is I was on Facebook and some guy offered me 700 gallons of milk. And I went, yeah, sure, I'll take it. Well, I went to bed, woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Like, what did I just agree to? So I called him and he said, yeah, sure, come down. And me and a friend of mine named Keith Tolbert went and got 588 gallons of milk. And we handed it out. The next week, I had 2,000 gallons of milk. And I had 2,000 gallons of milk every week. And pretty soon, I had 4,000 gallons of milk every week for 18 months. Somewheres along the way, the Farm and the Family program came along, and I was getting truckloads of food. And so we started handing out food, first of all in Chambersburg. Well, I started to find out I can get 4 or 5 trucks a week. So I was staging them all around Chambersburg, and then people in other states started calling me, and I had about 7 states where I was shuffling food. I had no budget, I had no money, I had no bank account, and somehow the 5 or 6 thermal trucks that I had and a couple warehouses were all being paid for because I was storing food at an alarming rate and sending it all over the country. It was a government program. And so I just started feeding people. And it fit my particular fancy. We handed out over 110 million pounds of food at that point and over 1 million gallons of milk. And we're way past that. I got involved with Blessings of Hope, and I was getting them food. They were getting me food. And I don't know. God opened the pipe. When you're willing to do the work, He provides.
So,
Do I sound eccentric?
did you deal in appliances for a while?
Yeah.
And did you have a story about your appliances, your supply of appliances or something?
No, I don't remember. too much water passed. Like
You weren't dealing specifically in appliances. You were just dealing in all sorts
whatever
of
I could get my hands on.
So Matthew 25 was the question that you were answering. What is the Matthew 25?
It's just a food outreach to feed people.
So the Matthew 25 is how you were operating
With getting stuff.
with Blessings of Hope?
Well, no. Blessings of Hope was a prime contract. They took 1% of the Farm the Family and distributed it on the East Coast. But what happens is they have excess food and they would give it to me because I was a partner ministry.
Okay.
And we just knew each other, and they started sending way more than I needed. And that's still going on. It was me, Keith Tolbert, and Michael Rentas. Now, the church I was going to, they wanted a ministry with Hispanic. So I created one. Michael Rentas. He's a Puerto Rican Pentecostal pastor. Me and him are friends. When I first met him, he's working for a friend of mine who went to Nationwide. And he said, I want to get into ministry. And I said, I'll help you. I didn't know how much I was going to help him later on. I just showed him that if you give things at an abundant level and you're radically hospitable, things just work. And this is an eye in a pie, or pie in the sky kind of thinking. If you are available, the Holy Spirit will provide you. It's Acts type behavior. We had so much stuff and we just gave it. without the concern of why. And it didn't matter if you said thank you, because it was more important that you got it. And you gave me the ability. When I feed people in the parks, I tell them, I want to thank you for being here. Because if you weren't here, I couldn't do this. And I really appreciate you coming. I'm sorry you're in a bad situation, but I'm glad you're here. And you give me the ability to be the person I need to be.
So you still control or own or whatever Matthew 25 project?
Yeah.
Is that the only one that you still have in your repertoire?
I'm pretty much limiting myself to doing the RV trip and taking groups of young people into bad areas.
So will you do that at will you try to do that at every stop if you can?
If I go and I show up at your town and you don't want to do it, then I go off on my own once or twice during the week. I'll go feed people. I'll find the encampment. The thing that I did, when I was looking at the church index and pilgrim.org, I started to notice that there were no Mennonite churches in the urban areas. And so I look over here and I go, there's nobody here. Let me look. And I looked across the country. And we've done terrible at evangelizing urban areas. What I was doing is finding all these places out in the country I can go visit these churches. And I'm like, I want to be in a city because that's where the fish are. So, okay, give you for instance, I got involved in something a little bit ago with Dallas-Fort Worth. Somebody called me and said, hey, we need some help. There are 10 million people and not a church within 38 miles of there. And if we're the answer to the people, why aren't we where the people are? The problem comes along that a lot of people feel that you can't raise children in an urban environment. Clayton Shank proved that to not be true in his instance. His children are more active than a lot of people. And he went into York. It's the mindset. We're farmers. We, being the Anabaptist Church, most of them are farmers. Yeah. And so they can't conceptualize being in an area where they can't farm. And it's part of the culture, the lifestyle, the can, and to put beets away, and to plant. And so if you don't have that ability, you don't feel you have something to teach your children. So it's a paradox that I don't know how to answer. But I need to be around people.
And you're saying if you go visit a small church that's 40 miles from a city or from a town, you can easily take a group over there and maybe raise some awareness and inspire some young people. And
in Cadwell, Idaho, Boise's 10 miles away.
Okay.
So I'm going to Cadwell. It's a German Baptist New Conference church, and I'm going to see if I can take them to Cadwell. If they don't want to, I can't force them. Yeah. So I'll do it myself. I got a grill. I don't need any help. I don't have a board of directors, and I can do it freely. And I go out there and I ask the people, one of the main questions is I say, has anyone ever been to prison? And somebody will raise their hand, and so will I. Has anybody been to a drug rehab? And I'll raise my hand. Has anybody been to a psych, I call it a nut house, or a psych ward? Mm-hmm. And I'll raise my hand. I'm showing them that we have some social equity here. And I still want you to come and eat with me. Food has always been the grease to the conversation. Mm-hmm. That's what Sower's Cafe is about. Feeding people through hospitality to bring them in to have a conversation. I'm just doing it at a level that's a little bit different. They're my people. They're where I'm from.
So when I was 18-ish, probably 17 between 17 and 20, there were several people in our church that went out every Friday and Saturday night. They would go maybe Sunday nights too. They would go to like the downtown district and hold up signs and preach on the street corners and stuff. And my dad would go with them occasionally, and several times I went along, like when I was young. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting, but you're going in and more feeding people. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I talked to them about Christ.
But why the different approach? Like, why are you not out there with a sign?
Because I can push them from the minute I meet them and tell them they're different, or I can accept them for where they're at and have a conversation.
So, I guess my question is like the mechanism of the street preacher mentality of, going out and yelling at people about their sins.
I love them.
You love the street preachers, or you love the sinners?
I love the sinner, where they're at. You can't show them a way out unless they can see a way out. In Kensington, the guy said, well, you don't understand. And I said, yeah, I do. 45 years ago, I was shooting dope over there. I'm here now. Now, I don't know if that changed his life, but there's empathy. You remember that I talked about in prison, pushing them, and you developed empathy? Well, the empathy goes a little further. I think people respond to kindness. Not that preaching isn't on the street corner with a sign. That's just not my approach. I would rather love you. I seen Christ loving the people. And then when he had a chance, you ever think that's wrong? I mean, you have to have a conversation. Now, if I gut punch you from the first time I meet you, you're not coming back. I lost you.
But I've seen you be fairly firm.
Yeah, yeah. Where? Hopefully not lately. Well,
no,
you
really.
have to be. You have to be sometimes. If somebody's going to manipulate you, I'm not going with manipulation, but you need some help. I'll give you some.
But it takes a certain level of street smarts. I mean, how do you feel about Mennonites being very gullible?
That's why Sowers Academy, it's just a name. The people in York, we were talking about starting a school to teach Street Smarts 101. Because, okay, I was talking to a friend of mine named Darrell Eby, and it was a stressful time, and I was just saying, all I wanted to do was start the bridge to freedom. And he said, Patrick, you are the bridge. What? You're the bridge from your culture to our culture. We need you to show us where. And that just did something to me. So part of the reason why I want to take these young people into the ghettos is to teach them to be safe while you're doing it. Part of that outreach into Kensington was to teach them how to be safe. Now, we were talking, maybe not me and you, I have this Washington Franklin hat, and they said, well, why'd you wear that? I said, because anywhere in that neighborhood, you could see that hat and you knew who was in charge. Now, the mentors had a purple vest on. The tribe leaders had green ones, and the tribe members had orange. So visually, you could see your team members at all times when you were working. And it was a way to keep the people safe. If you triangulate. I also told them not to go with less than 5 people. And if you're in a group of 5 people and you have a tribe leader with you, you're responsible. Don't go do your own thing. The other thing I said, if you give money, I'll never invite you back again. Don't give money. Money is the quickest manipulation tool.
So
I'll give you love, but I won't give you cash.
Don't give money.
Nope.
Now, why?
Because if money is the answer, then the amount of money that the churches have given would have solved the problem 85 times along the way. It's not working. It's a manipulation. If it's easy for me to give you money to relieve me of what I'm supposed to do, I'll do it. Because, here, just go. No, stand there and say, I'm not giving you money. I'll do anything else for you, but I'm not giving you money. And then when you weed that, first of all, that clarifies the first group of people that just want to manipulate. And if they're willing to stay, you have a little more chance of a conversation. And you can't get into their heart until you talk to them. So remove the tools that are manipulation. And I'm not saying money's the only one. There's other behaviors and things you have to be tough on. You say I was very tough and very to the point. It's to eradicate that quickly. And if you're going to stay, let's have a conversation. One of the best guys in the halfway house is a guy named Jerome. Jerome is a Muslim. He's a Nation of Islam Muslim, which is what it is. He was in jail for 36 years. Called me up and said, I want to be in the halfway house. And I said, well, you know, we're a Christian-based organization. He says, I'm a Muslim. I said, okay, that's it. And I went to sleep. And God was kicking on me. So I picked up the phone, called in, had another conversation with him. And I said, you know, Jerome, when you come, can you act like you're a Christian during devotions? And he goes, what? I said, can you sit there and act like you're a Christian when we're having devotions? He said, I'll do anything to get out. And I said, then we'll take you. And now, I would have never had the conversations with him later on. Like when things weren't going well, he's a Muslim and his boys aren't helping him. The Muslims aren't helping him. And he kept, oh, this ain't working out. And I said, isn't it kind of funny that everybody that's helping you is a Christian? Maybe God's trying to tell you something. And he never wanted to hear that. And we had that conversation 100 times. He's on his journey. My journey started when I was 22. And David asked me, where would I spend eternity? 28 years later, I'm in prison. And I fell, and I accepted Christ. It took me that amount of time on that journey to let them seeds plant. Jerome's on his journey. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't want to be number one, and I don't want to be the last one. I just want to be one of the 3,000 people that need to talk to him, to plant the seeds, that one day he goes, wow, I could have had a V8. And, you know, commerce-based ministry, I want to plant the seed and I want to see it grow. Christ-driven ministry, I just want to be there to make sure that I put some water or I make sure the seed's there. I don't know. I just have this theory that we're supposed to be one of many. But we're caught up on this sudden conversion and, oh, look what we did. It's not about us. It says one will water, one will weed, one will plant.
That's an interesting concept and interesting attitude, because that is something that I've heard often. Like people say, "Yeah, might as well just. There's no point in it's not working. It's obviously not working. So why do we keep doing it?"
When we started the room, I told the people involved, I know we do this week after week and we get no results, but we're getting the results you just don't realize are inside of you. It's hard to be positive, even though you know somebody's not listening. And it's an inside job. It's not an outside job. It's not what I do for you to change you, to make you better. It's what you're doing to help me be better. And when I look at things like that, my life is interesting. I know, you have to have some results at some point. You have to say, or you'll lose heart.
Right, yeah.
But for the most part, I'd rather just have a conversation and feed somebody a hamburger. Somebody one time said, who's going to write your book? Or are you going to write a book? And I said, no, I'm not writing a book. Why would I write a book? Well, how do people know? And I said, they will write my book. In other words, I was just being flipped. Mm-hmm. It's not important what I do. It's what's important is what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm a better person. And I don't mean this like, oh, I'm a better person. No, I'm a better person for realizing that Christ. Okay, I was going to say something. I'm going to switch directions here. I seen The Chosen. It's a movie about Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
It's anyway. He went to the woman at the well, and I know they took liberties here, but it expresses how I feel about things. He went up and said, "Woman, give me some water." And then he turned and she said, "Here." And he said, "I came here to meet you, and you have made it. You've made it able for me to do my job." There's a certain amount of humility and humanity that the Savior was portraying himself like he couldn't have done his job unless he came to see you. And that made that woman at the well special. And I love that idea.
Yeah, I do too.
I came to Samaria just to meet you. Do you think it's an accident that I'm here in the middle of the day?
I am rejected by others.
I do too.
So you knew where I was going with this.
Yeah, no.
And so that's what I have adopted. You're the most important person here. And it's not an air, it's not a tagline. It's a core value. I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's not important. But it's important to the person I'm feeding or talking to.
Yeah. Making them, it's not right to say making them feel human, because that's not what you're trying to do. You're
Giving them humanity.
giving them
once
humanity.
again.
Yeah.
And see, that's what I lacked in prison. I was a number, HB 2088. It wasn't until I started working with other people who were in worse shape than me that I realized I have it pretty good. I don't know. I was rough when you met me the first time.
Well, you weren't that rough.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I felt roughed.
I remember you before that, but one of the things I remember about you that always makes me chuckle is whenever there was a guy who got a little out of hand at King of Fellowship weekend, and I looked around. I was usher. I looked around trying to see what everybody else was doing. I looked over there at Patrick, and Patrick looked at me, and a couple of people started looking at Patrick. Pretty soon he goes up there.
And I put my arm around him. He had a problem with shutting up. He didn't have any off switch. And I put my arm on him, and he looked at me, and he's like, "What?" And I said, "Just go ahead and finish up." And then when the time came, I walked him off, and I took him to Gary Miller. I couldn't talk to Gary Miller because I was on parole and he was on parole. But I took him to Gary Miller, and Gary Miller dealt with him. That was a human way of handling a problem.
Yeah, it was nice. It was respectful, but it was just like, wow, like I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I was just kind of like, what do you do with this guy?
Love him.
And we knew somebody that knew what to do, what to do with guys like that.
I've made a lot of mistakes, and I look at some of the past videos that I've done, and I'm calling people saying, "Oh man, how could you have stood to be around me?" Because I feel bad, because I see myself in a light that I didn't want to be, and I apologize for my behavior. And they go, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I know where my heart was."
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. I want to just take a trip and spend time with people, getting to know them and them in church, in their church with them, and then them outside of church. One of my favorite stories, do you know who John D. Martin is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I went and listened to John D. preach. He was up there for an hour and 45 minutes, and we're sitting outside, and he said, "What do you think of my sermon?" I said, "Well, I listened to you for an hour and 45 minutes. Do you fish?" "What? What did you think of the sermon?" I said, "Do you golf?" And he's like, "Why are you asking this?" I said, "Because I know what you think about Christ. What do you do? You're more important. I want to know about you." And that's what solidified our friendship.
that does actually I mean, you actually hit on something pretty important right there, because that does take giving humanity to people. And that's been one of my complaints with the more box style Mennonite church, is that you
Big
get
box church.
yeah, big box big box Mennonite is you get together on Sunday morning
Yeah.
for a very prescribed type of service. There's no there can be spirit movement inside the service, but it is not going to change very much. It's going to be, 3 songs, it's going to be a devotional, it's going to be some singing, or, Sunday school, whatever. Like, all this is well laid out beforehand, which most churches have. You have to have some sort of structure, I guess.
You need it.
But if you're just going to church on Sunday morning, running your little gauntlet, very comfortable, you know what's going to happen next, no surprises, no weirdos in church, that you end up really never knowing each other very, very well. You know what this brother's going to say in Sunday school. You know what kind of devotional he's going to have. You know who can sing and who can't. But, do you golf?
That's more important. And I've done that to a lot of people, and they're like, they don't know what to say. Well, first of all, a lot of people who meet John is starstruck because he's a rock star in the Mennonite community.
He is.
Because he's put the work in, and he's really a special person. He's my friend. And so if I go to somebody starstruck, I'm going to view him as a star. And none of us are more important. And it's not my way of trying to break him down or anything like that, but I realize that if I approach him as just another brother, it equalizes the relationship. Now, it was very important to me. I would walk around and say, dude, this is when I was new in the church, dude. People are like, why are you doing that? And one day, I got a very profound person to say, hey, dude. And I was happy. And he was like, people around me were like, why? I said, because I got him to come to my level and communicate to me the way I'm comfortable. And then they started telling me, well, dude isn't right because this, that, and the other thing. But it wasn't the word. It was the action. And I don't know if he understood how important that was to include me by using my language in a way that I understood. That made me feel special. And so if I can go around and make others special, maybe, like, I'm not unique. I think there's a bunch of people that want to come in and want to do this, but they don't know how to.
Right.
So I want to break the door in some way.
Yeah.
And lower the standard. See,
you want to lower the standard without lowering the standard.
Well, see, when I came to the church, Clyde Lehman was the bishop. And I said, Clyde, I'm so happy that you lowered the bar and let me in. But the reality is you lowered the bar and you let me in, which means you seen past my past and let me in. But now I'm going to shake things up. And I was doing it in a funny way. So I guess the way I want to shake things up is to bring people like me. Because I know that I don't mean you particularly, but the church needs diversity. Water running into itself creates a stagnant pond.
Well, I mean,
you got to bring fresh water in. And I'm not saying we need to change things or anything. Just you need other people. And I've heard that many a times. We need you. And I'm like, yeah, I'll trade places with you. But, the church needs other people with other thoughts. Because it's the challenging of each other. Iron sharpens iron. And when I came in here, I was 2 raw pieces of iron. It made a lot of racket. 15 years later, it's like a little softer. And I think now I can be sharpened a little bit better. But I had to go through the sanctification process of being a knucklehead and making all these mistakes. Wow, I could have done it differently to get to this place. Now I'm psyched. I'm looking forward to an adventure. I'm like that 18-year-old kid looking for that mission to go to. But I'm 64. I need something just as much as they do. And if I didn't find it, if it wasn't offered, I'd probably just go back to what I was doing. And pretty soon, I would be angry. Or I would, anger is a bad word, I know that. But if I didn't have something to do, I might start pointing my laser at you.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by anger. And so as long as I'm doing something, it keeps me from focusing on you and keeps the focus on me. And it's not self-centered thing, but the focus on me is by reaching out to others.
Well, I'm excited to see what this tent making is going to look like, and all the, and hopefully you're going to draw a like a net, and a connection, and something that.
I want to be a Kingdom Fellowship weekend. This is why I told people I'm leaving the West Coast to tell people on the East Coast how they do it. So when I get back to the East Coast, I can tell them how they do it on the West Coast. And I'm just being flip about that. But I'm walking out. I don't have a parachute. I don't have a safety net. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how it's going to happen. But I have faith that it can happen. And if I end up over here and it doesn't work out, I did something. And I'd rather do 100% of what I'm doing than 100% of what you're not doing.
Yeah.
So
it's like Abraham going out not knowing whither he went.
You know, you have to walk in faith.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I love the idea of the cave of Adullam. David went to the cave of Adullam with misfits, mess ups, and he formed the army. And I think in my life, I look for the misfits and the mess ups. I sit in the back of the church, so I'm the first one to say hello and the last one before you leave. And they go, well, you need to sit up front so you get paid. No. I'm in the back seat. That's where my people are. And I don't mean my people.
Yeah.
It's my social economic stature. The people that come that don't want to be there. The people that come that do want to hear, but they don't want to put the work. And if they're encouraged to do some more of the work, they might stay. And if they stay, they may change something. And so the church will look more like me than it does like you. That might be dangerous.
No, actually, it'd be great. I mean, no, that's what we need, right? That's what everybody says.
I love that idea.
We don't want to. We need it. It's time to move away from a culture-specific church where we're all of, a very, very narrow German descent.
You guys found something through you guys being the Swiss Anabaptists. By being willing to sacrifice everything to gain a little, it changed the world.
Yeah.
The thing is, after a while, they lost the inspiration. How can we kick that inspiration? Let's put the youth to work. Me and Lyndon Risser are working on doing Matthew 25 and going to different cities throughout the United States and staging these where we go in and take people and keep them safe and show them this or this. This is where you're coming from. This is where you could go. It's shock therapy, basically. Wake up. Realize that what you got's pretty good. Quit complaining.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay.
going to be fun. We should wrap this up.
Yep.
It's been nice talking to you.
Very good to talk to you.